I welcome you all to join this very first session titled Truth in Exile, Journalism and the Fight for Credibility. In an age when facts are fragile and noise is constant, our panel will explore how courage, verification, and thoughtful storytelling can rebuild the public trust. Please join me in welcoming our speakers. Mr. Zain Khan, Editor, Diplomatic Affairs, Minute Mirror Newspaper, Pakistan. Mr. Leo Wigger, Fellow for EU South Asia Relations, Mercator Foundation, Germany. Ms. Carolina Chimoy, International Correspondent, Deutsche Welle, Germany. And Mr. Shamsuddoza Sajen, Special Content Editor, The Daily Star. Now, I'm requesting my fellow panelists to take their seats up on the stage. For these sessions, our moderator is Mr. Zain Khan. Mr. Zain Khan, the floor is yours.
Our session today tackles one of the most critical challenges of our time: the erosion of trust in mainstream media, with the rise of fake news, misinformation, and disinformation. We are here to discuss how editors and reporters can cut through the noise and reclaim the narrative of truth. My name is Zain Khan from Pakistan. I am the editor of Diplomatic Affairs Minute Mirror newspaper, and I will be moderating this conversation. Joining us on our powerful and amazing panel, Shamsuddoza Sajen, Special Content Editor of the Slow Read section at the Daily Star. Welcome to our panel.
Thank you.
Our second guest, Leo Wigger, Fellow for EU South Asia Relations at the Mercator Foundation. He is also the co-publisher of Zenith magazine. Welcome to our panel. Our third guest, Carolina Chimoy, the international correspondent of DW News in Germany. Welcome to our panel. I want to start with you, Leo. How do you perceive the coverage of the Gaza massacre in Western mainstream media?
And wow, okay, so I just had my first coffee, and this is a pretty tough question to answer. So surely there have been a lot of problems and shortcomings in Western media when it comes to covering Gaza. There's, on my view, there's no doubt about that, and I think this is a huge problem for credibility of Western media as well. If we look at it from a perspective in Berlin, what's the baseline when this is started? You know, like, of course, in Germany, the historical background there is that our history is, of course, very, very closely defined by, you know, the incredible atrocities that were committed against Jews in Germany that have in many ways resulted to the creation of the State of Israel. And are still affecting Jewish life in Germany until this day. It's very important, I think, to have this in mind, that every single synagogue in Germany is still 24/7 under police protection, which is not the case for mosques in Germany. There are way more mosques, of course, than synagogues, because the Muslim population in Germany is 50 times as big, roughly, as the Jewish population, which doesn't mean that there's no Islamophobia in Germany. There is a lot of that as well. That's another question. But that is one side, and the other side is that Berlin is a city that has the largest Palestinian diaspora in Europe. So, you know, it's only fair to say that the, you know, war in Gaza has really heavily affected civil society in Berlin. And this, of course, influences how it's covered by journalism. So I would say that a lot of the mainstream media in Germany have failed to really, you know, be as serious in reporting atrocities that have likely been committed by Israeli armed forces in Gaza, as they have been in other conflict reporting. But it doesn't mean that there was no reporting on that as well. And Zenit magazine, which is a independent magazine which is focused on the Middle East, which I'm co-publishing with a couple of other people, we have focused very, very heavily on what was happening in Gaza. Our last 3 issues were on that topic as well. And in one issue, for example, we brought in Palestinian journalists from Gaza who were talking about like how they see the future of Gaza. What are their visions for the future of, how Gaza could look like. We did one other issue where we focused on global voices, on voices from the global south, how they perceive what is happening there and how they see Europe's role in that. And this was very blunt, and a lot of the things that were reported were certainly not what the government of Germany wanted to hear. But it's also important to make sure that it's understood like what happened then, when we did that, when we reported these things. You would probably expect that we were called by the government, that our funding was cut, that we were curtailed. Nothing of that happened. To be honest, we didn't face a single consequence for our reporting on what was happening in Gaza. And I think this is also important. So I'm not saying that, others did what they should have done, but it's also that there is space for covering, what was happening in Gaza in Western media. I leave it here for now.
Shamsuddoza, Sajen, speaking of Gaza, I want to ask you a question because Gaza is on a macro level. I want to ask you a micro level question. We can get into the details. How do news platforms hold power accountable without being labeled anti-state?
Thank you for the interesting question. If I talk about the situation in Bangladesh, so before the uprising, the reality was that whatever we publish, be it a corruption-related news, be it any criticism of any government projects, particularly the development projects, because the last government, they used to say that, okay, for people who are mostly poor in Bangladesh, they need development, not democracy. So whenever we ask questions about the cost of mega infrastructures, they used to say that we are against development, we are against the country, we are anti-state. After the uprising, we are facing a new situation. So whenever we are criticizing this government, they are saying that this is the government of the uprising. So when you are asking question, pointing finger to this government, you are basically criticizing the uprising. So there is a new threat. Now both the government and the popular mob who the government kind of patronize, or at least I say they don't rein in these mobs. So that is the new reality for us in Bangladesh. And also the government here is trying to create a, I will say, competing reality. Because what we report in our newspaper, the government say that, okay, you don't know the original sources, because the government has all the information. And here is a kind of reality that whenever we use any data, the government say that, okay, this data is from the previous government, so this is not true. So when we ask them, okay, give us the latest data, they say, we are working on it. And also, again we say that, okay, so which data we will use? They say, okay, our press department will contact you. So these are the problems we are facing. So it is really difficult not to be anti-state as long as you want to be impartial. Thank you.
My next question is to you, Carolina. I watch you on DW, and this question has always arisen since we're talking about holding power accountable. And today the topic is journalism and the fight for credibility. As an international reporter, your critics might claim that you are a journalist with a foreign narrative. How do you address these sort of criticism?
Thank you for the question. Well, I think the critics are not only that. There is a lot of hate against media in general. So it's not only about the way you report, but just being a journalist is in a way also being a target for many. I mean, as you all know, when you hear in different media channels or from politics, they all refer to the media. And I always ask myself, what do they mean with the media? It's not like a person, but it seems to be a huge monster that is constantly trying to destroy things. Now, we are in a competition about credibility. The only thing that can help us to reach that trust of voters, of people who want to be well informed, is to deliver quality journalism, to deliver facts that cannot be fought about. I think that is the strongest weapon to fight about that. That hate and that distrust that people have against media.
You've raised a very important point, and I want to know your personal opinion on the growing restrictions on journalism globally. How do you see this phenomenon?
I covered the White House when I was based in Washington, D.C., while Biden was the president. And even then, and that is, I think, the problem, because there is not only hate from one side, but also fear from a governmental side. Also in many Western countries, I felt restriction it depends, right? You can have different ways of restriction, like not delivering facts and acting against the media, but then you can also have restrictions in meaning you allow certain journalists to attend press conferences, and for the other ones there is no more room. That is, for example, also I do think that even democracies have been closing the doors for journalists, not as in restrictions, but as in fear of misreporting. And that is a huge, huge mistake, because it can be understood also as restriction against freedom of press. I think we are in a time where we're seeing so many crises all over the world that it is particularly dangerous that also the media, the ones who are meant to give the information for people to be well informed, at the end they make the core of a democracy by voting, that also the media houses and media networks are in a crisis. And part of this crisis we're in as networks, as media houses, is of course the technology we're in. AI, social media, all of that, huge challenges for us.
We'll speak about AI later. I saw you last month on DW reporting on Ukraine. How was your personal experience reporting and working as a journalist in Ukraine?
Well, the challenges there are more challenges in a war zone. There are already challenges as a journalist, of course, but in a war zone it's different, because you have to, especially when you're close to the front line, at frontline cities, in the frontline area in eastern Ukraine, you have to act very, very fast, very quickly. It's difficult to have, if you're reporting in a hospital that is being attacked, to have quiet interviews, sitting down and going really deep on different stories there. And then the situation in Kiev is a different one. You have there much more politics. You have the regular press conferences. Sometimes they take place in bunkers. So yeah, it's just completely different to report from a war zone than from a country that is not at war.
Leo, we were talking about restrictions. I want to talk about regulation. Is better reporting enough, in your opinion, or do we need regulation on hate speech, fake news? And if we regulate journalism, does state involvement risk damaging credibility?
Another very big question. Thank you for that. Well, let me start with the first bit again, with restriction. I think better reporting is more important than ever. And I mean, you know, I can only speak for a Western perspective, but I think what we see here at the moment is that overall the political environment across the globe is getting, you know, in many ways more competitive and polarizing. And I think journalism is kind of lacking behind in a way to keep up with the challenges that the societal change overall presents to everyone, including journalists. And I think in Western journalism for a long time, it was very comfortable in many ways compared to other parts of the world to be a journalist. But I'm afraid that being a journalist is nothing comfortable. Your job is to uncover truth and speak out and up about what is actually happening. And this is your job, and the job of a military spokesperson is to be a military spokesperson and to, you know, like give their perspective, but it's not your job as a journalist to just write down what they tell you. It's your job to question what they tell you. And I think in this like more competitive environment that we see in the West and in other parts of the world as well, journalists have not been as kind of blunt in many ways and standing up for their values as they should have, I think. And I think this is where things need to change. What I wanted to say with my story, and I mean, again, this is a very personal story with what we did at Zenit. Like, we had some fears, of course, whether this would come, you know, at a price, our reporting. It did not, and it kind of reminded me that the space for critical journalism is in many ways actually much bigger than, and again, can be very, very different in Bangladesh or in Pakistan. You know, I'm in no position to talk about that. But in the West, I think space for critical journalism is way bigger than many journalists actually perceive it. And if it's the job of journalists to really max that space out, right? And I think that could be done much better. Should I go to the other question as well, or?
I totally agree with you. I do think, though, that it's very important because I see this in a lot of young colleagues who start being a journalist, and many of them have an activist attitude. So being a journalist is not about defending things, defending a position, defending what you think is right. It's about finding out what the truth is. What are the facts? This is the truth, even if you don't like it. So if you're doing critical journalism, you don't have to criticize everything, you know. There might be also points where you even agree with a certain policy that is being done, and you just want to understand it better. And I think that is something that we're mixing up in journalism nowadays, and I think this is also part of the reasons why people come up with this hate and mistrust against journalists, because they think we are adopting a position by defending something. So facts for credibility, not being an activist, but just trying to find out the truth. I think that is our main task.
Leo, I'd like you to touch upon the second question, so then we can move on to our next guest.
Sure. So I think that's of course a very, very slippery slope, kind of between. Is regulation needed, for example, against hate speech? And I mean, of course, with the advent of social media, with fake news, with AI-generated fake news, I mean, there's a huge trouble. It's a huge problem all over the world. And I would kind of agree with the basic assumption that governments should be able to regulate that to a certain extent. The problem is, of course, that very often, once governments start to regulate fake news, hate speech, and so on, they cross a line. And they cross a line where it's not about, kind of stopping hate speech, but actually going against people who have another opinion. And that's wrong. But it's a very, very blurry line in practice. And I think this kind of dynamic is something that needs to be renegotiated between the public, between journalism, and between government and the executive. And we see that in South Asia, of course. I mean, Bangladesh, of course, had a huge issue around that with the DSA and others. But we also have that in Germany, for example, where there were cases where people have been arrested for hate speech online, and this has also caused societal backlash, because people were like, how can you arrest someone who's just saying his opinion online? But where's the boundary for that, right? Like, what's an opinion and what is hate speech? I think this is something that needs to be renegotiated, and it needs to be renegotiated all across the globe. But it's really important to safeguard spaces for public opinion, of course, and to make sure that this is not a tool for increasingly restrictive governments all over the world.
Shamsuddoza, you are the special content editor of Daily Star, the editor of the slow read section. And why I repeat that is that my question closely revolves around that. How did does slow journalism still stand a chance in the viral era, where journalists and everybody else are looking for views, likes? How can one sell verified truth to social media audiences?
Thank you again for the interesting question. So, against the viral newses or viral reporting, we started the slow read sections, and the motto of our section that you read slowly and think deeply. So that we are trying to encourage, because there is a common mechanism or trope of lie detecting, that you allow the person to speak more, speak in details. So it is really difficult to tell a lot of lie. Even if you read a report, when there are lot of details in the report, you will see that you can connect different dots. Instead of that, if you look at any viral news and its structure, you will see that they have a certain point, they try to make it viral, and they emphasize on that part only. And they kind of delete or remove the other interesting details of the news. So we started doing that thing. We try to add as much details as possible. And that's why you have to read it having more time and read it slowly. And also, we are trying to engage people with the stories, like not regular reporting, but the background of an event, so that when people read other newses relating to that event, so that he can have a background, have some details, so that he can connect with the event. So that's why I think in this age of viral and disinformation, digital disinformation, it is more important to encourage these forms of long read and slow read sections. Yeah.
Speaking about social media audiences, I want to get to you, Carolina. Mm-hmm. How does social media and AI, what are the contemporary challenges of social media and AI in journalism, in your opinion?
Huge challenges. Starting by social media, I think that is precisely one of the biggest challenges. We all know that, even as journalists. We're scrolling down on X or Instagram, or it's a very fast reading. You get very sometimes superficial information on things, because things are happening also so fast that people don't take the time anymore to read deeply. So I'm really impressed, and I already admire your slow read section. Great idea. the big question to me, and that's how I come back to social media, is how do you sell it in the sense of, within your newspaper? Because I don't know, how about you? I mean, my bosses, they do want to see also clicks and likes. And I don't know if with a slow read section we would get it. And probably that's the main problem, that one of the main thinkings of a sector that is mainly an economic sector, the offer and the demand, are also being the rule in our world, in the media world. Something where that should not be the rule. We should not be working just thinking of offer and demand, but also of things that are perhaps not being clicked as much as a 50 seconds, 1 minute long reel, but that have more content. How do you sell that to your bosses? Because that is one of our huge problems. We try to be present in all social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. And at the same time, we do in-depth reports. How do you combine both things? That's one of the... Oh, and AI. AI is just getting started. So I think it is a huge challenge. It also offers opportunities, because I think it might at some points give us more room to work in depth on things, and let more quick work, superficial work being done by AI. I think that will be possible, but it's also, it would be difficult, especially for audio visuals. When you can just, I was watching RT yesterday, Russia Today, and they have, I don't know if you've seen, they have an advertisement on Russia Today, and it starts with Joe Biden saying that he did a lot of mistakes, and Ursula von der Leyen saying she did some politics, but she didn't really say what she was meant to say. And at the end, it's George Bush saying, well, yeah, we normally don't tell the truth. Now we are, but only thanks to AI. Otherwise, we would be still lying. And I was like, because at the beginning, you only see that it's AI at the end, right? And at the beginning, I was like, what is this? When did Ursula von der Leyen say that? And I mean, it's just getting started. We're going to see a lot of more things. We're going to verify a lot of more things. We're going to have to spend a lot more money on verifying facts and videos and pictures. Huge challenge.
Today, one of our titles are Truth in Exile. How do you perceive truth deeply? What is the truth in journalism? And do you believe that there is a such thing as objective journalism?
Again, a very, very deep question. Not in absolute terms. That's yeah, for sure. And I think it's also important to be cognizant of that every... And this is like a huge challenge for social media, like for journalism overall, of course, in times of social media, where like profiles of, like journalists are much more accessible for everyone. It's, like, it's never just like an independent report that is being published. It's always also the person who publishes it, and kind of distinguishing these two from each other has become even more like impossible than it was before in the age of social media. Absolutely. But I think it is still, like it should be the job of journalism to be as objective and as possible. Of course, that is very important. Can this be absolute? No, but it should aim to be as objective as possible. That's one thing. And yeah, I mean, you were mentioned like yeah. No, I mean, this is a huge topic, and I completely agree with you, of course. But I think another very important challenge for journalism is, of course, capacity. And in many ways, financial capacity as well. I mean, overall, if you compare the budget of media outlets today to 10, 15, 20 years ago, we're seeing steep declines. And the challenges are not getting smaller, right? So capacity to actually cover the stories in the depth that they deserve, in the, you know, kind of plurality of perspectives that they deserve, is really a problem. And this is also important to have that in mind. And of course, again, with like, you know, like covering topics that are not as popular but very important is also a huge problem, and often a dilemma. I mean, again, Zenit is an independent media. It's very small. We have to choose very carefully what we use our resources for. And one challenge for us has been Sudan, very honestly. I mean, what's happening in Sudan is one of the biggest humanitarian crises in the world. It's insane. It deserves a lot of attention. It's not getting the attention that it needs, frankly. But the problem is that our like Sudan articles are not very popular. Almost no one reads them. You know, like I mean, we're not doing that, but anything that is about like whatever, you know, like small movement the US administration is doing, you know, in coming up with, you know, like a step of a peace plan that will probably never work out for Gaza, this article will be clicked like 15 times more, at least, than an article on the crisis in Sudan. This is a problem, right? But what to do about that as journalists, this is a problem that I'm thinking a lot about, and I don't have a clear answer to that.
Shamsuddoza, we talked about different challenges. What are the challenges for journalism in South Asia, mainly?
Let's start with Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, I have already said that earlier we had a different type of challenge when the government was authoritarian. And now we have a government of uprising and also the mob. So this is a new type of challenge. And I think these will remain, because if you see who are the consumers of the news, so they have their own preferences. They live in their echo chambers and they want to read those news that they want to believe. So rather than they going for a in-depth report or impartial report, they have a kind of feeling that, okay, we know everything, and that through social media. And now the mainstream media, they have to toe the line and they have to report the way the social media influencers, the social media platforms they follow, they have to report in that way. So that is a big challenge, I think, for all the South Asian media and also globally. Another thing is that the new technologies, particularly the AI, in Bangladesh also, we are already seeing that some people and some quarter, they are using those AI tools to create a new narrative, and that narrative through distortion of history and distortion of facts. But in Bangladesh, where the literacy rate is still very below, and the media literacy is really poor, so it is really difficult for the mainstream media to counter those social media narratives or YouTube narratives, because those YouTube narratives, they have a propaganda, and that really attracts people, and that is not for this generation. It has been for all the generation, that peoples have a kind of liking for the viral things, for the provocative things. So an impartial media, they can't provoke anything. Their duty is to report what has happened. So it is a really difficult for all the news channels, all the reporting and all the media channels to kind of compete with the YouTube and that kind of social media who are trying to create a competing reality. And the government, they are also supporting this, because in many cases, particularly after the uprising in Bangladesh, we are seeing that the social media influencers, they are in connection with the government and they are jointly creating those narratives. And they are saying that, okay, the mainstream medias in the time of the authoritarian regime, they didn't much raise their voice, because during that time, it was really difficult for any media, because the last government, they have been for the last 15 years. And so it was difficult for the mainstream media to criticize the government in open way. But the influencers, many of them live abroad, so it was kind of easy for them to say many things and many unverified things through their channels. So now those social media influencers, they are saying that, okay, see, these media, they were part of the earlier regime and they always peddle the lies and don't believe them. And that has, I think, really kind of created a problem for the mainstream media, because the distrust about the mainstream media has, I think, it is much, much more than earlier times. And it is growing. And therefore, whenever you kind of say something that, okay, it was reported in the mainstream media, they will say that, okay, they were part of the earlier regime, so they are saying the lies. So it is not difficult to create a new media after the uprising. And those channels, and some channels, they have started their operations, but they have a kind of a clear motto that, okay, so we are not bringing something new, or new in the sense of, okay, we are with the spirit of the uprising, with the spirit of the freedom, we are emphasizing on the freedom of expression. Rather, they are trying to encourage the mob and trying to news and cover those things that the mob likes. So that is the problem. I think it is also true for India, also true for Pakistan, because when we talk to our colleagues from that regions, they say that the mob, along with the government, is a big problem and emerging problem for the media.
Carolina, we've spoken about AI and social media challenges to journalism. I want to get to a very important question, and all of our participants have discussed this. How does fake news impact journalism as a whole, and how can journalists actually counter this challenge?
Well, facts, again. I think facts are the strongest weapon to fight against fake news. But the problem is that we are in a time where facts are relative. That's what some people say or think. Everyone has its own facts, as you were saying. When you ask for facts at the government, they tell you these are the facts from the past government, it's not our facts. So facts are facts. There shouldn't be like facts from the old government, from the current government. And in order to, it is important to not believe everything you read or see, but in order to question that, and to start thinking by yourself, what could be the truth? Where can I get my information from? It's crucial to have a good education. And I think perhaps that is part of the solution, not only against fake news, but also of democracies eroding, everything that we're seeing now. Perhaps governments worldwide have not invested enough in education. And it's not being part of the main discussion right now. I mean, if I see what is being discussed in Germany, in Europe, in the US, it's all about weapons and military right now. And of course, that's the time we're in. There are wars all over and conflicts. But I think education is a crucial aspect of, and a reason why we are in the times and in the media crisis we're in. And also a tool to fight against fake news, more education. I mean, how can you have people having your slow read if some perhaps don't like to read, can't read? It's like the basis for thinking by yourself and criticizing, and also asking yourself, can this be truth, what I'm seeing? The video of Russia Today yesterday, for example. Questioning yourself, yeah.
Leo, I don't watch TV. I stream online, and I watch YouTube for my news, Twitter. Do you think that in the long run, in the next 10 to 15 years, mainstream media would be taken over by social media, in your opinion?
I mean, I think media patterns of use are changing, of course, and like Gen Z, of course, uses media very differently than the generations before, which is, by the way, not a new development. That has always been the case with every generation. So I think it's also a question of adaptation. Will be, established media platforms be able to adapt to new technological realities? So I think in many ways that's a much more open question, in my opinion, than it's often presented. But of course, like, will analog TV make a huge comeback as the main platform of media? Absolutely not. I don't think that's going to happen. That's in many ways a technology of the past. Will it entirely disappear? Who knows? Probably not. I mean, people are still, listening to LPs from time to time. It's not that whenever a new media kind of technology is arising, it means that previous ones are entirely disappearing. But there's going to be like a continued change of patterns of usage, which is, again, nothing historically new. When it comes, I think I want to make another point, because I think this is also about truth, by association, or it's the truth of the previous party or the truth of the current party and stuff like that. I think that's a very dangerous development, and I think there's also this kind of problem that with social media journalism, that you interview people in a way that is not critical, and there's kind of a connection that the people who are on your show are in your team. And I think this is a very, very dangerous development. Thinking about Bangladesh, I was just following that very recently. I think there was this controversy about Khalid Muhyiddin, and who's one of the most popular hosts in Bangladesh, who said that he would, if he had the opportunity, he would interview Sheikh Hasina. And as you all know, this got a huge backlash. I think from a journalistic perspective, this is a very, very dangerous development. I mean, if I had the opportunity of interviewing Sheikh Hasina or Vladimir Putin or Benjamin Netanyahu, I would definitely do it. But I would do it on my own terms. Of course, this is the main distinction. As a journalist, you have to take these opportunities. This is your job. But interview them as critical as possible. Ask them the right questions. Don't buy just their narratives. But this is your job as a journalist. If you have the opportunity to speak to a former head of state, you have to do it, but do it properly. And just being like, well, if you meet that person, you're part of that team. That's not journalism. And I think this is a very, very dangerous development. So yes, you have to take the opportunity of uncovering truth whenever you can. That's how I see it. Thank you.
Now, Leo, why I was asking this question was because, we all see that people like Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan, they have more audiences than many mainstream channels. So that's why that question came into mind. Shamsuddoza, Sajen, I want to get to a question. How do professional journalists and journalism as a whole view citizen journalism?
So we talk a lot about citizen journalism, but the mainstream media, the way it works, it has very little opportunity to kind of adopt the citizen journalism thing. For example, what the Daily Star does, we created a platform where people, they can send their stories, their videos, and also they kind of tell us about something happened in their areas. So people started sending us those news and events and also many videos. The problem is that the mainstream media, it structures in a more kind of way that they prioritize the issues, what the government, there is a kind of thing like that, okay, in Bangladesh, a large number of people, young people, they are out of education, they are out of employment, and they are not in any kind of training. That number is huge, and they don't have job. And if you look at the reasons behind the recent uprising, young people, they were frustrated about their job. Particularly, students who completed their masters or higher education, they are not getting good jobs. But after the uprising, the issues, all the medias, the government, all the social medias, they are busy with how the next government and the next which political party will dominate the next government, how will be their coalition and that kind of things. But the education, the employment or the job creation thing, that was totally lost. And when we talk about kind of covering those issues in our media, so our seniors and also those particularly who take the decision, they say that okay, do that, but first do that report where the mob are kind of attacking a regime, a people or an elected MP or any other kind of government officials who were part of the earlier regime, or do another viral reporting things. So that way the main issues that the media they should focus on, that already lost. I think when we talk about the media and the kind of citizen journalism, I think we need to restructure the media's narratives, the way media works, and also what are the issues we highlight. So when we kind of keep people at the center, so then what people are saying, because in Bangladesh and also I think globally that is the problem, people don't talk much about the problem they face. They are more busy with the other things which have they have the kind of they are more involved with the politics, they are kind of more involved with the big things, but the everyday things that they are suffer from, so they are not kind of that have in their focus. Again, the recent example of the earthquake in Dhaka, the way the urban city was developed and the in a worst unplanned way, most of our buildings in a risk if a 6 scale earthquake happens here. But when the last 2 or 3 tremors happened here, people are all talking about how the buildings will be that can be retrofitted or those kind of things. And you see after 2 or 3 days another viral thing happens, another political event happens, people will forget it. So I think that's the problem, and that's also the problem for the medias also, because they always run after the viral news. And if they could have kind of set the agendas the way that okay, these issues, these are the most important issues for the people, so people would have more their kind of options to contribute, and that way citizen journalism would flourish in Bangladesh.
Before we get to the questions by the audience, I would like to request everybody to give a round of applause to our brilliant panels. Let's get to the questions.
Good morning, everyone. This is Ashik, working for Bangladesh Peace Observatory as a research data analyst. Before reaching to my question, I would like to talk about India and Hungary, since these two countries are led by populist governments. In India, back very few years ago, Indian journalist Ravish Kumar coined a term named Godi media. That means the media who are working as the lapdog of government, BJP government. So this kind of media promotes regime's narratives by vilifying Muslims or vilifying its two Muslim neighboring countries like Bangladesh and Pakistan, and also spreads Hindutva ideology. And they actually apply butter and flatter strategy to appease government instead of questioning the regime. And if I talk about Hungary, before 2019 election in Hungary, Viktor Orban got a low popularity, but he used his media that affiliated with him, with his regime. They support, by manufacturing consent, they vilified refugees and immigrants by portraying them as a threat to Hungarian culture, language. But the fact is, only 5,000 refugees used to live in Hungary at that time, but still he portrayed them as a threat to Hungarian culture or language or Hungarian race. So my question is, do you ponder this kind of journalists who spread narratives of government can be regarded as a threat for democracy and dissidents?
A very excellent question, and I would like to add that the media that you mentioned, Godi media, it's one of the reasons for Islamophobia in many places. Who would you like to ask the question? Which one of you would like to address this question?
Well, that's not journalism, of course. We're talking then more about speakers from the government, and I think that should be made clear in that case. We are living in an era where that migration topic is coming up again. I was covering 2015, the whole migration flow that came into Europe, and I remember that Hungary was building that wall in the Balkan route. But I mean, regardless of that, it depends on the discourse that the government is giving, and if it's being adopted by certain media houses without questioning it, and just if it's just being repeated, and therefore they're making it bigger. They're acting as speakers of the government, and I think that should be made clear. That is, of course, not journalism.
Anybody else? Next question.
My name is Mir. I'm president and co-founder of Brave Dimension Global. It's our organization working for USA and Bangladesh. So my question is about counter-narrative. So in Bangladesh right now, what is happening? Religious extremism is too much. It's overpowering everything, including gender diverse community, transgender community, Hijra community, and sex worker community. So I'm representing this community. I'm a non-binary person myself. I know it is tough to be a non-binary person in a country like Bangladesh. But I want to speak it up. I want to get the solidarity from everyone. My question is, how can we create counter-narrative in a country like Bangladesh as an intersectional activist? How we can work together? And what is your suggestion, especially from Bangladeshi journalists? Thank you.
Shamsuddoza, like to address.
Thank you for the very important question. And after the uprising has a motto that we are against the discrimination. But after the uprising, we are see that kind of challenges, the new kind of discriminations are happening or occurring here. And the most affected section, I think, the intersectional peoples. And also in Bangladesh, for media, I must say, we used to cover reports on transgender communities. But after some events, a few religious, I must say they are religious extremist groups, they kind of propagate the things that, okay, transgender related issues, those are promoted by the Western governments. And those are part of the effort to kind of Islamophobia and also kind of dismantling our societal norms and values, those kind of things. So to protect those, we must have to counter the Western narratives and as well as the things supported by the Western countries. So one of their target was transgender. And after that, I surprisingly saw in Bangladeshi medias the transgender issue that was totally lost. And I must mention here that during the uprising, the transgender community, they played a big role in supporting the people who are on the street. Even we saw that when people were afraid of like carrying the wounded people to hospitals, the transgender community, they came forward and they played a big role. But after the uprising, they are kind of now a villain. So it is a kind of pattern of any kind of this mob or populist politics that they try to create enemy out of nowhere. So not only the transgender community, intersectional community, they are now attacking different Islamist group. Even the singers, the baul singers who are traditionally folk singers, so they are attacking those people. They are so not only the political opponents are their enemy, but they are creating new enemy, and their main goal is to create a division in the society, like we and they. And among the we, all the things like the secular, the communist, the intersection people, the transgender people, the any kind of people, they kind of see as a threat. So that is kind of a strategy for them. And what was most surprising, when a person like Dr. Yunus was at the helm of the Bangladesh government, we thought that the issues of the gender issues that will get more importance, more prominence. But unfortunately, we saw the opposite thing. Even the government, they formed various reform commission. One of them was the Women Commission. But the Women Commission, their reports got the least importance. And when we see that when the government, they formed a commission where all the reports and their recommendations will be collected, and the government will create a July charter, they said that that will be the kind of future roadmap for the next government. And in that commission, there were no member from the women, from the gender committee, from the transgender committee, from the intersectional committee. So that is the really problem. And in the future, I think the way the mob and the populist things they are growing, it will be really difficult for people from these sections to work. And I think media should be more proactive here, and they should identify and kind of work with not only inside the Bangladesh, but also with global human rights organization and the global governments who promotes these rights, these freedoms, and also media freedoms to cover these issues. I think that will create a pressure on the government, or create a kind of inclusive situation that will help report on these things. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's sometimes a bit of a dilemma from a Western perspective to look at this, because of course there is this perception, as you mentioned, that a lot of these like agendas are being brought to Bangladesh from the West, like LGBTQI rights or women's rights and others. But I mean, this is really bizarre in many ways. I think in many ways historically the opposite is true. I mean, like hijra, is something that is around Bangladeshi society way before colonialism. Quite to the opposite. In many ways, the restrictive kind of gender legislation that we see in many post-colonial states are colonial legislations at first. So you could historically make a very strong point to argue that a lot of these concepts were indigenous to Bangladesh and to many other places, and the persecution of that is a Western concept that was brought in by Victorian moral norms and stuff like that. And and when it comes to women's rights and Islam as well, I mean, I was just a couple of some time ago, I was in Morocco, in the city of Fes, which is the spiritual capital, was the capital of Morocco before French colonialism, and it was one of the greatest centers of Muslim learning for centuries. Guess what? It was founded by a woman in the 8th century, so 100 years after Prophet Muhammad was alive. One of the biggest centers of Islamic teaching was easily founded by a woman without any problem. No one was coming up with anything. And now we're living in a time where politicians from Islamist parties in Bangladesh are kind of framing women's participation in the workforce as a concept that comes from Western capitalism. I mean, in many ways, historically, this is really bizarre. This is not history. And I think sometimes it's really important to counter these narratives. But, the problem is, of course, that doing that from the West is very difficult, because it will always be like, well, it's foreign. I cannot disagree more, but that's me.
Hi, my name is Nishan Dimel from Sri Lanka. I head probably the largest think tank in Sri Lanka, and one of our 3 divisions is on media and politics. It's called Verite Research. This is an issue we've been thinking deeply about, so I left a lot of other interesting places to come here and be with you all today. Maybe I want to just limit my comment or engagement right now to what I think is the most critical emerging problem for media and how we solve it. We've been saying for the last 10 years that the word post-truth society is a little bit of a mistake, because we don't meet people who say, I don't care about truth. The real problem that has occurred in our societies comes not from the loss of interest in truth, but the lack of anchoring trust. We live in a post-trust society where people really don't know who and what to trust. And consequently, it looks like post-truth because now they can believe anything once you can't anchor trust. Now, the response to that is how do you build trust and how do you become an institution that people trust? And that has played out in different ways. But the emerging challenge with AI, I think, is imposter posting. That people post as if they were you. It happens to Verite Research all the time, that there are posts that look like surveys we've done, look like things we've said, the logos are there, but it's fake. Now, we run the kind of most powerful fact-checking site in the country as well. We only fact-check politicians and high-level bureaucrats. But you can't fact-check at the, these social media at the speed that AI can generate them. So really what we've now built is a technology to kind of counter that, because I agree with Carolina completely when she said you have to educate the consumer. Actually, it's, and that's what we do, but we also want to build resources or tools for consumers to be able to figure out what to trust. And so the latest tool we've built, now we're talking to some global institutions in adopting, is an embedded QR code in any post we do, such that the consumer can just click it and see whether it is actually from our website or not. And that can't be faked, because basically if it doesn't come to our website, we said if you can't trace it, don't trust it. So if we educate consumers globally, and lots of media stations have to get involved everywhere to tell people, don't trust these WhatsApp stuff, these videos that come without a link. If you can't trace it, you can't trust it. And then, of course, we go back to the old problem. How do trustworthy media stations build trust? And I think that's a problem we are willing to take on, right? All of us know that building trust is critical. We are doing it. But now AI has undermined that possibility because it can pretend to be people that you trust. And even if the consumer is educated, it can fake it, right? So that is just like the Bush videos and all that kind of thing. But I think the antidote to that we have to build is media. It can't be done by one single media station. So this is really the question to you all. We need a system. Building trust, you can do it by yourself. But the threat of AI fakery requires all media stations all over the world, the big ones, the good ones, to collectively agree on resourcing consumers in a common way. So that consumers say that if it's a trustworthy station, they'll have this trace facility. So I just want to say, to talk about perhaps from you all, well, how do we work across media stations that are responsible to build a system that consumers then know that if it's a responsible media station, they're doing these 2 things or 3 things. Therefore, they have much easier for consumers to decide what to trust and not to trust. And I think we need to start talking about something like that, Zain, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, sir, that is an excellent question. And you used 2 very interesting terms, post-truth and post-trust. Could you explain just in a few lines the difference between these 2 terms? Because it's a very good question.
So post-truth, the way Oxford Dictionary defines it, is to say that people don't care. This, you all also said truth is relative. It's my truth versus that person's truth. The idea that we have become so relativistic that we don't really care for truth. We are just interested in, having a view or a position. I have not met a single person who says that about themselves. People seem to care about truth. Truth still anchors things. But they will say, well, don't trust those guys. Right? I don't trust mainstream media because they were part of the old regime, Shamsuddoza said. I don't trust, things on this website because they were part of, I don't trust the United States or the UN. So it's a crisis of post-trust. Means that in the past, we had, like you said, BBC, or for some people it's New York Times, or some people it's like global leaders. When they said something, you felt like you could trust it, and it anchored trust. But in a post-trust society, we have completely destabilized anchors of trust. And people are left kind of floundering to figure out where they can put their trust. And when they don't know, they automatically gravitate towards things that appeal to them. Because, well, you then kind of vest with the possibility of trust those that say the things you want to hear, but that's a human kind of weakness or problem. But when you don't have a place of trust, you have no way of challenging your own truth. That's really the way to understand it. You need somebody you trust to challenge your truth.
Excellent
Otherwise,
question.
you end up with your own version of truth, which looks like post-trust, but the crisis is really a trust problem.
Excellent question. Thank you so much for the question. Carolina, would you like to address this?
It's a very difficult one. I agree. I think that media would have to act together to fight against fake news, alternative facts. But then I can already imagine what the narrative would be from the other side. The media are getting together to create their own facts and to verify their own stories. So I don't know if that would help in the world we're in. I think, because also the media who spread fake news, they are also organized, right? And they are also acting or trying to act in a block, similar to the far-right parties, for example, the famous CPAC conference coming from the United States, a very conservative conference that took place also in Budapest and also in Latin America. We are reorganizing ourselves in the media sector, but also the political sector is, and we're always like spreading more apart from each other. So I think this is just creating a gap, and it's polarizing us on a macro level as well. I get your point. I like your thinking, but I'm not sure if that would help.
Just to say, Carolina, it's not about facts that we collaborate on. It's on what you said, educating or resourcing the consumer.
Yeah.
So that we can collaborate on. Not about saying this is our version of truth, but here's how you figure things out for yourself.
Yes.
And in giving that tool, we need a collaborative form.
I understand. Yeah. I like the idea, but I'm not sure how that would play out in our polarized world.
We'll talk later because we've
Yes,
devised
please.
it.
Yeah, we're having like a bilateral here.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us in this session in such an early morning. Today's topic, Truth in Exile, Journalism and Fight for Credibility. I'd like to thank Bay of Bengal team and Mr. Zilla Rahman for this amazing event today and this conversation. We are now ending this session. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and a round of applause for our participants.